Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. We continue on book 7, which is kind of like the problems that emerge. The question that it deals with the theme of self restraint or lack of self restraint, akrasia, or and kutia, this idea of the ability of what it is in that sense, the question of this, and how is it different, is what it is compared to the virtues of like temperance and sophosune, right? These things. Today we're looking at chapter 9. We're continuing our analysis of it. We're looking at the self-restrained person. So um, uh, uh, let's look at it. We'll continue where we left off. Is then a self-restrained person someone who abides by any argument whatsoever and any choice whatever, or does he abide only the correct choice? Okay. So it opens up. Is it by any argument the self-restrained person, or the correct choice? So this is the sense. Um, and is a person lacking self-restraint someone who fails to abide by any choice whatever, or any argument whatever? Or does he fail to abide by the argument that is not false and by the choice that is correct? In other words, does he fail to abide by the argument that is not false or by the choice that is correct? As in as in the perplexing question encountered before, right? This is the previous thing we did, the question of what we dealt with in the previous couple chapters, the questions of this question. Is it simply just any kind of failing to abide by either the correct opinion or the correct choice, or is it only, in other words, is it any kind of failing to abide by a choice or an opinion, or is it a failure to abide by the correct opinion only, or the correct choice? Or is it only incidentally that the argument and choice involved are of this sort, are of this or that sort? But it is the true argument and the correct choice in themselves that the self restraint abides by, and the other does not abide by. Okay, so this, in other words, is it only the correct choice, uh, or that he abides, the self-restrained one abides by, or and the other does not abide by? Okay, for if someone chooses or pursues this given thing on account of that given thing, he pursues and chooses this latter in itself, and the former only incidentally. In other words, he doesn't. In other words, he's not choosing it for the right reason. He hits on the right thing, but does not do it for the right reason. Right. In other words, for if someone chooses or pursues this given thing on account of another reason, right? They do this not because they chose to do this, but accidentally. This is accidentally, right? Incidentally. And by itself, we mean unqualifiedly. So therefore, it's being done, but in itself because we choosing it in itself, right? This is what it means by the in itself here, unqualified. There's no qualification why we're doing it. As a result, in one sense, the self-restrained person abides by any opinion whatever, while the person lacking self-restraint departs from it. So, in one sense, this is correct. The self-restrained person, in one sense, the self-restrained person abides by opinion. He does what he chooses. In other words, while the person lacks self-restraint doesn't. But in an unqualified sense, it is true. It is the true opinion that what one abides by and what the other departs from. So there's two ways he's saying that it's in one, the unqualified sense, and this unqualified, in a qualified sense, okay, there is this, it's the failing to achieve any opinion in that sense. And in other words, in one sense, the self-restrained person abides by any opinion. In other words, he holds the opinion, he does it, right? He holds an opinion and he does it. This means he's consistent in that sense, right? And he chooses this and does it. Okay, this is in one sense. And the person who lacks self restraint is he chooses something but fails to do it. Okay. Now the question is the thing chosen the right thing? In the qualified sense, no, it doesn't matter if it's the right choice. It is that it's any choice in that sense. But in the unqualified sense, right? The unqualified sense in itself, the concept of self-restraint and lack of self-restraint means that it's the correct opinion, the right thing to do. Okay. There are also some who are inclined to abide by their opinion, right? Whom people call obstinate. Okay, this is the obstinate. Okay, this is the such people are hard to persuade, and once persuaded, not easily changed. So he raises, in other words, this is a person who's they don't change their mind. They make an opinion, they make a mind up, and they're going to stick to it. If it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. It's going to stick to it. And once they made their mind, it's going to be hard to change their mind. Okay, so it's not easily changed. They have a certain similarity to the self-restrained person, just as the prodigal has to the liberal and the reckless to the confident. But they are different in many respects. So he's equating this in this sense. As the prodigal, the spendthrift is kind of similar to liberal. Remember, the liberal is one who's good. The virtue of liberality is the person who is correctly giving money, correctly spending money, right? But the spendthrift is the incorrectly spending money, right? The confident person, the reckless person is one who is simply just doing it. No, it's the person who is the confident person is. I think maybe the word courageous here would be. It's that I'm confident I do it. I know this is like this, but the reckless person is simply just does it without any restraint of it. Okay, there is this similarity he's saying to this. So therefore, there is this obstinacy and self restraint has a similarity, but it's different. It's one, the self restraint in its absolute sense or its unrestrained sense is the correct opinion or the correct choice. The obstinate person is just refusing to change their mind. It's more like an error in that sense. Doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, it's just a refusal. For the one, the self restrained person does not change on account of passion or desire, but it may sometimes happen that he will be readily persuaded by reason, whereas the obstinate are not persuadable when they take hold of a given desire. And in fact, many of them are led by pleasures. Okay, so therefore, this is the problem with this: that the obstinate is simply just somebody who they won't change. The self-restrained person can be changed if reason persuades him that this is wrong. If reason is persuasive to show that he's incorrect, and this is not the correct choice or the correct opinion. So it's persuadable. In other words, the self restraint in other words, is persuadable to change, whereas the obstinate isn't. And the obstinate also is not only they're unchangeable; it's usually because their desire, they hold a given desire, and they usually led to those desires by pleasure. He says the obstinate types are opinionated. The obstinate types are opinionated, the ignorant, and the boorish. The opinionated being such on account of the pleasure and pain that are at stake. They delight in the victory they gain. If their persuasion undergoes no change, they are pained if their own opinion becomes null and void, like decrees. In other words, if they don't may not change, they get pleasure and pain. They delight in the victory they gain. If their persuasion undergoes no change and they are pained by their own opinion, if their own opinion becomes null and void, like decrees. And as a result, they resemble more the person lacking self-restraint than they do the self-restraint. So therefore, this is interesting. The obstinate is like obstinate types are opinionated and they're ignorant and often boorish, right? The opinionated are being on account of the pleasure and pain are at stake, and they delight in the victory they'll gain. But if their choice doesn't lead them, they feel what happens. Their opinions become null and void, right? And as a result, they're more like the unself-restrained person, he says, because than they do the self-restrained, lacking self-restraint, the acrosia, right? There are also some who do not abide their opinions. So next one, so if we talked about the ones who we dealt with here, the question of self-restraint like this, and the general sense and specific sense. Now we're dealing with the obstinate, right? The obstinate. And now we're dealing with another kind, that they are those who do not abide by their opinions, but not on account of lack of self-restraint. So therefore, it's not because of they don't abide by their opinion, because not because of lack of self-restraint. For example, Neoplatonists and the Sophocles' Pleokites. It was, however, on account of pleasure that he did not abide by his opinion. Albeit a noble pleasure, telling the truth was noble in his eyes. But he was persuaded by Odysseus to lie. To lie. For not everyone who does something on account of pleasure is licentious, or base, or lacking self-restraint. Rather, he does something on account of a shameful pleasure as such. Whether he who does something on account of a shameful pleasure as such. So in other words, the licentious, the person but not everyone who does something on because of pleasure is licentious, only or base or lacking of self-restraint. Rather, it's only those who. So there's this example of Neoplatonists who Odysseus tells, go lie, but he won't lie. The pleasure of he gets by telling the truth is just so overpowering he won't lie in that sense. Therefore, there is something not. In other words, he is. In other words, he will not abide by their opinions not on account of self-restraint, but because on something else, a pleasure of this noble, right? Of being a noble pleasure of telling the truth, what is noble in his eyes, right? But since there is also a sort of person who enjoys the bodily pleasures less than he ought to. So this is the next kind. This is one who. This example has no specific name. We get no name for this kind of person who loves the noble thing so much that he won't do what reason a correct decision. It might be a useful, beneficial, good or good act, but it requires him doing something he thinks is not noble, right? And that he can't, even though he's persuaded by it, he won't do it because of this pleasure he just can't not do the noble thing. The pleasure he gets from being noble or perceived noble in that sense, maybe. But since there is also then we have another kind of person. Then there is also a sort of person who enjoys the bodily pleasures less than one ought, and who does not even abide by reason. The self-restrained person is in the middle between this person and the one lacking self-restraint. So this is, in other words, the self-restrained person, the person who is the one who lacks self-restraint. Pleasure, he enjoys pleasure more than, in other words, his love of pleasure leads him to, his enjoyment of pleasure leads him to disobey what reason tells him. This person is what he does not he doesn't enjoy bodily pleasure. The person who enjoys the bodily pleasure less than one ought, and who does not abide by reason. You see, in that sense, right? So this is in the middle ground of that sense. This person lacking self-restraint. The person lacking self-restraint does not abide by reason because he enjoys something more than he ought. This person because he enjoys something less than he ought. While the self-restrained person abides by reason and does not change on either account. So therefore, this guy doesn't abide by reason, but he also is not being driven by pleasure in the sense. It's the opposite. He's driven by the fact that he doesn't get the pleasure of, or doesn't. You know, and there, if in fact self-restraint is something serious, budios, both of these contrary characteristics ought to be base, just as they in fact appear to be. So if self-restraint is something spudios, something serious, then these contrary things, this one who does the one who lacks self-restraint, and the one who, this other name, this person who feels no pleasure but doesn't abide by reason, right? Gets no pleasure from something, does not who he enjoys. In other words, he doesn't get the same. He gets no pleasure from as he ought to get, but simply again does not abide by reason, right? These are base characteristics, and they as they appear to be also. But because the characteristic that leads one to enjoy pleasure less than one ought appears in so few people and on few occasions, then just as moderation is held to be solely contrary to licentiousness, so too self-restraint is held to be solely contrary to the lack of self-restraint. In other words, so too self-restraint is held to be the sole contrary to lack of self. Therefore, this is because it's so, what he says, this person who doesn't abide by reason, but he also doesn't get the pleasures. This is so extraordinary. This, as you want to, in other words, he should feel. This is how he should feel pleasure, but he doesn't. This person, he or she doesn't. This is so extra in so few people on so few occasions. So it can't be held as a common thing, and it's extraordinary. Even though they're contrary to the self-restraint, only one that is, therefore the question is, as licentiousness is the sole contrary to licentiousness, right, in that sense. Self-restraint is the sole contrary to lack of self-restraint. Many things are spoken of by the way of a certain similarity. They may, since many things are spoken of by way of a certain similarity, they may share. It has followed that we speak of self-restraint of the moderate sophisunes person, the moderate person, by way of a certain similarity they share. So therefore, there's a similarity in a sense. The moderate person, what the moderate sophisunos, the person having sophisunos or moderation, and the self-restrained person is kind of a similarity they share. The self-restrained person is such as to do nothing on account of the self-restrained person is such as to do nothing on account of the bodily pleasures that are contrary to reason, and so too the moderate person. But one person has, and the other does not have, base desires. So in other words, the moderate person has no base desires. The self-restrained person has these desires. Okay, and the one is such as not to feel contrary pleasures contrary to reason, and the other such as to feel the pleasures but not to be led by them. So the difference is the sophisunos, the moderate person, neither has any base desires, nor are they. In other words, they're not feeling those desires. They're not being. In other words, they don't have those desires, and because they don't have those, and those desires are not acting on them in any meaningful way. In that sense, whereas the self-restrained person has those base desires, and those things, those desires are acting on him. He feels them, but he's not being led by them. He overcomes them in that sense, right? That's the difference. Those lacking self-restraint and licentiousness are similar as well, although they are in fact different. Both pursue the bodily pleasures, but one does so while supposing he ought to. That's the licentious, right? He surrenders to it. The licentious is the one he supposes, he chooses to do so, or the other supposes the one who's self-restrained knows that he shouldn't do it, In other words, the other while supposing he ought not to. So the lacking self-restraint is not, he acknowledges that this is wrong. This person says no, he doesn't acknowledge this is wrong. And this is how we end this chapter here on this question, wrapping up this question of self-restraint and how, some of the things. So let's stop here. If you have any questions or comments, questions or issues, please put them below. Now, when I see them, I'll respond to them. If you like the video, hit the like button, please. It helps the algorithm in that sense. It helps the channel grow. It helps the attention. Share the video if you liked it. Share it with your friends. Share it on your social media. Share it far and wide. If you have not subscribed already to the channel, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel grow. We're making some grossing spurs and hopefully get more attention. Another thing is that if you didn't like the video, you can always hit the not like button, but say why in the comments so we all can benefit from it. People can benefit from it and understand why it's being done. And maybe we can learn something. Again, if you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. For those of you, encourage your friends to come join and introduce the channel to some people. Another thing is, you want to follow me on social media, more about me on social media, you can follow the links below. If you want to know more about me as a researcher and a scholar and that stuff, when I do my research and things like this, you can follow the links below, the academic social media links below the social media links. And if you want to help me to do what I do, you want to help me financially a little bit do what I do, you can do so through Patreon and Subscribestar links that are below those. Another way you can help is to buy one of my books. The 3 books that are currently available listed below. You can order it through your local bookstore or through an online bookseller like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or whatever. Or you can order it through the publisher in that sense. So there's some things. Well, that's it. I hope you have a good day. We'll look at next time. We'll see. We'll look at chapter 10. Take care and bye-bye.